trade war game theory, China's opening gambit, or America's bluff? Introduction. At first glance, the 2025 resurgence of U.S.-China trade tensions looks like a familiar rerun. Tariffs fly, markets wobble, officials issue combative statements, and headlines flash warnings of decoupling. But something is different this time. Beneath the surface, a more sophisticated game may be playing out, one that upends the conventional assumption that China is merely reacting to U.S. aggression. What if China is not the cornered opponent, but the one advancing a new kind of strategic opening? What if the U.S., for all its bluster and market size, is being baited into overextending itself? In this exposition, we explore the emerging evidence and historical analogs that suggest China may be mirroring and improving upon the U.S.'s own playbook for economic dominance. This is no longer just a trade war. It's a psychological, financial, and political contest unfolding on a chessboard of global leverage. 2. The alleged $50 billion Treasury sell-off. In early April 2025, long-dated U.S. bond yields spiked with unusual ferocity. The 10-year yield surged past 4.5%, while the 30-year briefly touched 5%, levels not seen in over a year. Amid the turmoil, posts on X claimed that China had dumped $50 billion in U.S. treasuries in a single, deliberate move. The message was clear. China wasn't just angry about new U.S. tariffs. It was ready to retaliate in kind, hitting Washington where it hurts most: its debt markets. Yet, official data tells a murkier story. Treasury International Capital, data lags. And as of the latest release, December 2024, China's holdings stood at $759 billion. No concrete evidence has emerged confirming a specific $50 billion sale. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick both denied any link between market volatility and U.S. policy shifts. But the timing was too precise to ignore. Markets don't require proof to move. They only require plausibility. The rumor didn't need to be verified. It needed to land, and it did. Yields soared, risk appetite evaporated, and within days, the U.S. blinked. 3. America's sudden 90-day pause on tariffs. Shortly after the bond market tremors, the U.S. administration announced a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs, an unexpected move from an administration previously adamant about going all the way. Officially, the pause was framed as a diplomatic gesture to allow negotiations with over 70 countries. The bond market, they said, had nothing to do with it. But President Trump himself hinted otherwise, acknowledging that he had been watching yields closely and saw some signs of stress. The contradiction speaks volumes. If bond market signals weren't the cause of the pause, why mention them at all? The reality may be this: the U.S. needed an off-ramp. China may have just given them the reason to take it, without firing a single missile or publishing a press release. This content is brought to you by Bobby Giggs. Promote your brand here and reach a wide audience across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the links in the description to get started. Section 4. Learning from the Master, U.S. Consumer Dollar Hegemony. To understand this move, we need to rewind. For decades, the U.S. has leveraged its domestic market as the ultimate carrot and stick. This wasn't just about tariffs or sanctions. It was about addiction. Exhibit A, Germany, 2018. After the U.S. withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, European leaders protested. But when it came to corporate behavior, there was no protest at all. Siemens, Daimler, and other major German firms pulled out of Iran, not because Berlin said so, but because continued engagement with Iran risked exclusion from the U.S. market. France, 2025. President Macron reportedly urged leading French firms to begin reducing their American exposure. Their response? A blunt rejection. France's top CEOs essentially told him to get stuffed. The U.S. market was too important. In both cases, access to U.S. demand overrode domestic policy. Sovereignty was nominal. Control was economic. Foreign corporations had been, in a phrase, economically conditioned to serve Washington's interests. Section 5. The strategic flip, China's corporate embeddedness in the U.S. Now China is flipping the script. Apple's iPhone production relies heavily on Chinese labor, logistics, and component manufacturing. Tesla's Gigafactory in Shanghai isn't just a cost-saving site, it's a cornerstone of its global expansion. NVIDIA's dependence on Chinese talent and AI infrastructure is only increasing. These firms aren't merely operating in China, They are embedded in China. This is more than trade, it's corporate embeddedness, and it creates a back channel for influence. When geopolitical tensions rise, China doesn't need to negotiate directly with Washington. It can whisper to Apple, delay permits for Tesla, slow shipments of critical parts to NVIDIA. Those firms, in turn, lobby the U.S. government, not out of loyalty, but out of necessity. The U.S. market may still be powerful, but it is no longer unilateral. Section 6. The Game Theory Lens. At this point, the trade war starts to look less like a brute force economic struggle and more like a multi-move game of strategic deterrence. Through the lens of game theory, China's actions begin to resemble a classic tit-for-tat approach, retaliating in calibrated ways while always signaling a willingness to return to cooperation if the U.S. de-escalates. Let's break this down. Ambiguity as leverage. The $50 billion Treasury sale wasn't confirmed, but it didn't have to be. Its potential was enough to influence U.S. behavior. That's a classic use of strategic uncertainty, a known tool in game theory that allows one actor to project power without actually deploying it. Reciprocal tariffs as deterrence. Rather than respond with blanket aggression, China waited for the U.S. to act and then matched it. In scale, not rhetoric. This keeps the game symmetrical and preserves China's image as a rational actor in the eyes of the global South and non-aligned economies. Corporate capture as a force multiplier. By embedding itself within the supply chains of America's most powerful firms, China has added an extra player to the board, U.S. corporate influence. This is not just economic strategy, it's proxy pressure. The genius of this approach? It forces the U.S. to negotiate with itself. Conclusion: who's actually bluffing? So who holds the upper hand? The United States still possesses unmatched consumer demand, financial reach, and military clout. But those advantages are now being contested by a rising power that understands deeply how the game is played. And not just played, but manipulated, mirrored, and mastered. What began as a trade war is quickly evolving into a contest of narratives, leverage, and conditional sovereignty. The U.S. once wielded access to its market as a tool of global discipline. Now, China is using the same principle, backed by corporate embeddedness and selective pressure, to discipline America's most powerful firms. And perhaps most importantly, it's doing so without declaring war, without announcing sanctions, and without needing to prove anything to anyone. This is the game. And if the U.S. doesn't recognize that it's no longer the only one writing the rules, it may soon find itself playing from a position it's unfamiliar with: defense.